There is a passage in the Torah that most people read in 30 seconds and never think about again. Deuteronomy 22 verse 23. A betrothed woman found with another man in a city. The sentence is one line long. Both of them shall be brought to the gate, and they shall be stoned with stones until they die. One line, 14 Hebrew words. And behind those 14 words, an entire legal system, a web of safeguards, a Roman occupation, and a village of 200 people whose opinions mattered more than any court. Mary was a betrothed woman. She was pregnant. The child was not her husband's. On paper, the law was clear. In practice, nothing was clear at all. This is the story of the law that could have killed the mother of Jesus, and why it almost certainly wouldn't have. Let's start with what the Torah actually says, not what people think it says. Not the Sunday school version. The text, Deuteronomy chapter 22, is the most detailed legislation on sexual conduct in the entire Hebrew Bible. Verses 13 through 29 cover a series of specific scenarios, each with its own verdict, its own punishment, its own logic. And the logic is not random. It follows a principle that most modern readers miss entirely. The law distinguishes between locations. Inside a city, verse 23. If a betrothed woman is found with a man, both are guilty. The assumption she could have cried out, someone would have heard, and she did not. Consent is inferred from silence. Both face the penalty. Outside the city, verse 25, in the open fields, only the man is punished. The reasoning, even if she screamed, no one would hear. The woman is given the benefit of the doubt. This is not a blunt instrument. This is a legal mind making distinctions trying within the limits of an ancient world to separate coercion from consent. But here is where we need to slow down, because what the law says on the scroll and what happened on the ground were by the first century separated by a canyon of interpretation procedure and political reality. The Torah prescribed stoning. But did first century Jews actually stone people? Imagine the scene. The answer is far more complicated than a yes or a no. The Mishnah, the written record of Jewish oral law, compiled around 200 AD, but reflecting traditions already centuries old, devotes an entire tractate to capital punishment. Tractate Sanhedrin. And reading it is like reading the operating manual of a machine that was engineered from the ground up to make execution nearly impossible. Start with the court. A capital case required a Sanhedrin of 23 judges, not 3 village elders, not a local bet din. 23 trained legal scholars. For a village like Nazareth, this meant the case would have to travel. To Sepphoris, possibly. To Jerusalem, certainly, for the most serious charges. Then the witnesses. Mishnah Sanhedrin. For one, you needed a minimum of 2 witnesses. Not witnesses to the pregnancy. Not witnesses to the rumor. Witnesses to the act itself. 2 people who saw with their own eyes the specific act of which the accused was charged. Each witness was interrogated separately. Sanhedrin 5:1 lists 7 mandatory questions. The Hakarat, what year, what month, what day, what hour? Where do you know the accused? Did you warn them? If the witnesses disagreed on any of these points, even the hour of the day, the testimony was thrown out. And there is one more requirement that most people never hear about. The witnesses had to have warned the accused beforehand. Sanhedrin 8:4. The accused must have been told in advance by the witnesses themselves that what they were about to do was a capital offense, and the accused must have acknowledged the warning and done it anyway. Think about what that means. 2 people had to see the act. They had to have warned the person before the act. The person had to have acknowledged the warning, and both witnesses had to agree under separate interrogation on every detail. The system was not designed to execute. It was designed to acquit. So the Torah says stoning. But the legal system built around that Torah made stoning almost impossible to carry out. 23 judges, 2 eyewitnesses, separate interrogation, prior warning, unanimous agreement, and even if all of that happened, there was still one more obstacle, the biggest one. and it wasn't Jewish at all. In the year 6 AD, roughly a decade before Mary's pregnancy, the Roman Empire absorbed Judea as a directly governed province. A Roman prefect replaced the local client king. Roman law superseded local authority on all matters of life and death. The technical term was ius gladii, the right of the sword. Only the Roman governor had the legal authority to execute. The Gospel of John records the Jewish leadership themselves acknowledging this limitation. John 18:31. When Pilate told them to judge Jesus by their own law, they responded, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." The historian Josephus confirms this arrangement across multiple works. The Sanhedrin could hear cases deliberate, even past sentences, but execution required Roman approval, and Romans were not particularly interested in enforcing Jewish purity laws. So, by the time Joseph sat in his dark room weighing Mary's future, the legal path to execution was for all practical purposes closed. The Torah prescribed it. The Sanhedrin made it nearly impossible, and Rome had locked the door. And this is the turn most retellings miss. That does not mean Mary was safe. There was a third court. It had no judges, no scribes, no witnesses under oath, no right of appeal, no Roman oversight. It was the village itself. In the honor-shame culture of first-century Galilee, a system that anthropologists like Bruce Molina have documented across the ancient Mediterranean reputation was not a luxury. It was an economic asset, a survival mechanism, the currency that determined whether your family could trade, marry, borrow, and belong. Honor operated on two axes. A man's honor was tied to his ability to protect the sexual reputation of the women in his household, his wife, his daughters, his sisters. A woman's honor was her sexual purity itself. When that purity was questioned publicly, irreversibly, the damage cascaded through the entire family. A father whose daughter was publicly shamed could not arrange marriages for his other children. A brother whose sister was dishonored carried the stain into his own negotiations. A husband whose wife was suspect became suspect himself, either complicit or too weak to control his household. For Mary, the danger was never really the stones. The danger was the well. Imagine the scene. A 15-year-old girl, visibly pregnant, walking past that spring every morning. The conversations that stop as she approaches. The eyes that track her belly. The women who pull their daughters away when she draws near, not from cruelty necessarily, but from the ancient maternal instinct to keep your children clear of contamination. Social contamination. Moral contamination. The kind that transfers through proximity and association. No judge ordered this. No law required it. No Roman approved it. But it was more effective than any court because it never ended. The Sanhedrin deliberated once. The village deliberated every day. Every morning at the spring. Every Sabbath in the synagogue. Every wedding where Mary was not invited. Every circumcision where her family sat at the back. This was the law that operated beneath the law. The law of eyes and whispers and turned shoulders.
Have you seen the new merchant
and against
in the
this
square?
law,
Yes,
there was no appeal.
East.
Now we need to be honest about something. The legal safeguards were real. The Roman prohibition was real. But stoning still happened. Not through the courts, not through the system, through the cracks. The most documented case in the New Testament is Acts chapter 7, the death of Stephen. He was accused of blasphemy. He was dragged outside the city. He was stoned. No Sanhedrin trial. No Roman authorization. The crowd acted on its own authority, the authority of rage, of certainty, of a group that had decided guilt before the first stone was lifted. Josephus records similar incidents. In Antiquities 20.9, he describes the illegal execution of James, the brother of Jesus, by the high priest Ananus in 62 AD, during a gap between Roman governors. Ananus convened a Sanhedrin without authorization, passed sentence, and had James stoned. When the new governor arrived, he removed Ananus from office for overstepping his authority. The point, the system worked most of the time. But systems have gaps, and in those gaps, people died. Could this have happened to Mary in Jerusalem? Unlikely. Too many eyes, too much Roman presence. The Sanhedrin's procedural safeguards would have prevented a formal case from ever reaching verdict. But in Nazareth, a village of 200 people, with no Sanhedrin, no Roman garrison, no institutional check on collective anger, the honest answer we don't know. The Mishnah's legal protections applied to the formal court system. They did not apply to a group of men outside a village wall with stones already in their hands. Mary's safety was never guaranteed by the law. It was guaranteed by one man who chose to stand between her and the system, formal and informal, that could have destroyed her. Matthew 1:19 calls Joseph to Chios, righteous, a lawkeeper. But look at what this lawkeeper actually did. He did not invoke the law. He did not claim his rights under Deuteronomy. He did not seek the public vindication that the honor system told him he deserved. He chose the option that had no legal precedent, no social reward, and no path to restored honor. He chose to marry a pregnant girl whose child was not his, to name the boy, to raise him, to stand in the village square as the man who either couldn't count to 9 or who knew exactly what had happened and chose to carry it. For the next 30 years, give or take, Joseph lived inside the whisper. The Gospel of John may preserve an echo of it. John 8:41. The Pharisees say to Jesus, "We were not born of sexual immorality." Many scholars read this as a pointed jab, a public reference to the rumors that had followed Jesus from birth. You were, we weren't. Everyone knows. Joseph absorbed what the law would have inflicted on Mary. Not the stones, those were unlikely, but the shame, the suspicion, the social demotion, the permanent asterisk next to his name in every conversation at the spring and the synagogue and the marketplace. He took the hit, quietly, without explanation, for decades. The law of stones was real. Deuteronomy 22 was real. The penalty was written in the Torah and read aloud in synagogues across Judea and Galilee every Sabbath year. But the world that Mary and Joseph lived in was more complicated than a single verse. There were courts designed to prevent execution. There was an empire that reserved the right to kill for itself. There were procedural safeguards so elaborate that scholars still debate whether a single authorized stoning occurred in the entire Second Temple period. And yet the stones were always there, on the ground, available, not requiring a court or a governor or a Sanhedrin, just requiring a crowd that had made up its mind. Mary survived, not because the law changed, not because Rome intervened, not because the Sanhedrin protected her. She survived because a tecton in Nazareth made a decision in a dark room with a dying oil lamp and chose to become the wall between her and every stone that could have been thrown. The stones are still on the ground outside the village. 2,000 years of rain and sun and wind, they have not moved. Nobody picked them up.
Only I decide what this is used for. To build or to destroy.